Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back from the ad break. You are still watching Prime Live. Now, up next, we have Brendon Petersen, who is a seasoned tech expert with a deep understanding of emerging technologies like AI. Now, he will be discussing with us the Cisco AI Readiness Index 2025, which identifies top performing companies or pacesetters that excel in AI adoption. Now, Brendon will also delve into what sets these organizations apart and how their strategies can help other businesses unlock AI's full potential in today's fast-paced digital landscape. Thank you so much for joining us, Brendon, and welcome to Prime Life.
Thank you. It's always wonderful to be here.
You are welcome. Now, can you tell us what is the Cisco AI Readiness Index 2025?
Sure. So the Cisco AI Readiness Index is basically a global report that looks at how prepared companies are in terms of using AI effectively. So the 2025 edition surveyed about 8,000 businesses and IT leaders across more than 25 different industries. And it doesn't ask, who's using AI. It's asking how ready are these organizations actually, to make AI work at scale. And then Cisco groups them into four categories. You mentioned one of them, pacesetters, chasers, followers, and laggards. So these are, from the most to the least prepared. And I think, there's some very interesting insights this year. But I think the one that most of what we'll be speaking about is that most AI-ready companies are already seeing, business payoff, faster growth, productivity gains, and even higher profits.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, can you tell us, how does the index assess AI readiness and what are the main criterias?
So there's six main areas that they look at. Strategies, so whether there's a clear plan or
Mm-hmm.
leadership commitment to AI. Infrastructure, so that's if the company's technology can actually handle those AI workloads. Data, how good the data is and how accessible it is. Governance, so that's the rules and regulations and safeguards about how AI is being used. Talent. So that's obviously, whether they are the right skills in place, and then obviously culture, how open people are to change and innovation. So together, all of these give a sort of rounded up picture of whether a business can adopt AI responsibly and effectively, not just whether, they hopping on the bandwagon with the latest tools.
Mm. And can you tell us, what are the key factors that can contribute to, a company's AI readiness?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned some of them sort of in passing now. I think
Mm.
one of the big things is you need to have a clear strategy and leadership buy-in. Because I think a lot of the times, you can get caught up in this wave of, oh, it's the latest new technology. We've got to, just hop on the trend because everyone else is doing it.
Mm.
But there's not necessarily enough buy-in from all the sort of stakeholders involved. So
Mm.
if there's not direction from the top, what's going to happen? So
Mm.
that's definitely one. You've got to have a strong data foundation because obviously AI is only as good as the data that it learns from. We've said this in many different ways, in many different conversations.
Mm.
And then people and culture. None of this is possible, without a culture that encourages curiosity and collaboration.
Mm. And also, are there any regional or industry specific trends in AI readiness that the index reveals?
Yeah, this one was actually quite interesting. Globally, out of all these 8,000 sort of companies that were interviewed who surveyed for this, only one in eight companies fall into that top pace setter group. And that seems to be fairly consistent from year to year. So it shows, in terms of these companies embracing all of these different aspects,
Mm.
leadership principles, having the right kind of data, having access to talent, all that sort of thing. Only one in eight companies is actually sort of is really getting this. I think it shows that all these other companies are still trying to figure their way out.
Mm.
Taking financial service firms, they are the most advanced because they've already got a lot of data and digital capabilities, understandably so. Heavily regulated, infrastructure-bound sectors, so public services, transport, those are the ones who are sort of lagging behind. But it's the tech and financial services who are leading the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then regionally, sort of break it down by region. Asia Pacific, unsurprisingly, shows strong momentum. Europe and parts of North America have slower infrastructure progress, and
Mm.
emerging markets are actually showing high ambition but lower readiness. So, there's a desire to want to adopt, but low readiness mainly because of skills and infrastructure issues.
Mm. And how about Africa? Because we do know that when it comes to technology, Africa it has to be also one of the continents that are slow, given low infrastructure, strategies, lacking talent, and all of the things that you've mentioned above. Do you foresee that happening? Do you see us adapting to AI or organizations adapting in the near future?
Yeah, I had so many conversations with Cisco and many other companies working in the space, and there's a lot of potential. We've got a lot of talent, we've got a lot of strong desire.
Mm-hmm.
The problems that I think we face are infrastructure, and then also we I think have a few concerns is obviously data sets, because a lot of the data that is African data, or the data we use on the continent, comes from overseas. There's not a lot of localized data. So that is something that we need to step up our game in. And this then comes down to governance, it comes down to data regulatory sort of rules and infrastructures. But there's a lot of willingness, there's a lot of investment being made and training being done. In fact, I'm in Joburg at the moment for Cisco Connect, where this is the big topic of conversation
Mm.
tomorrow. So there's definitely a lot of investment into the space. So I think it's more just a matter of time, not a matter of willingness.
Mm. And just to highlight quickly, Brendon, there, what do you think, or what's the mission of Cisco? Because, like, why is it that they're trying to make sure that companies are adapting or getting into AI? Why exactly are they pushing that?
I mean, the obvious reason I think any company would do it is
Mm-hmm.
obviously it serves their bottom line. We can't pretend that businesses aren't in the business
Mm.
of making money, otherwise they'd be NGOs.
Yeah.
Um, so we've got to be honest about that, but that doesn't necessarily need to be an evil thing. It's how they do it.
Mm,
I
mm,
think their whole agenda has always been, because Cisco's been around forever. For those of us who've been in the tech space for a long time, Cisco is actually one of those companies where its technology was used to create the internet as we know it now. So that's how long they've been around. So, they were sort of cornerstone to the internet as we know it now. They're trying to be the cornerstone of the next internet, which is, obviously AI and things. And
mm,
because they've got all of this expertise, working with so many different companies, they're trying to position themselves as the sort of almost, it's my term, a middleman,
mm,
where, there's so many AI tools like there was with cloud, and there's so many different new features and adaptations and changes and things. You never quite know what's right for your business. So they're not trying to position themselves as if you don't know, you come to us, we'll find the best for you, even if it's not a Cisco product.
mm,
We will help find what's right for you so that you can actually make the right moves in your adoption instead of having to spend, hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of rands or dollars. And then it's like, oops, we spent the money on the wrong thing and now we don't know what to do. So,
mm,
that's where they sort of trying to position them, and that's how they see themselves. They trying to sort of almost be not just a middleman, but almost like a safeguard, helping you, or a big brother, shall we say, helping you make those right decisions and making those ethical decisions. A couple of years ago, I was at Cisco Live in Las Vegas, and I spoke to the I couldn't remember the title, but essentially it was, sort of almost like an ethics kind of thing, so responsible, not just AI, but responsible tech, green tech, all of those sort of things, making sure they're doing good by the planet, doing good by people.
mm, mm,
And this was a couple of years ago when, those massive fires were happening from Canada moving down over to New York, and, the skies were orange and people couldn't see. And I sat with her and I said to her, it's very ironic we're having this conversation now because a lot of companies will sort of greenwash. They'll say all the right things, but they
mm,
don't actually follow through. But speaking to her, you could see that this wasn't just a thing that, oh, she's saying because she's speaking to a journalist. You could see this is something she lived and breathed before she joined Cisco, before she got to that thing, that sort of level of C-suite. So it is, it's part of their DNA to make sure
mm.
we're helping people make the right decisions because they know, we're at this disadvantage, unfortunately, in Africa when it comes to having access to a lot of these things.
Mm, most definitely. Now, I also want to talk about, the challenges that businesses could be getting from implementing AI solutions. Now, how can, businesses actually overcome those challenges? What advice would you give to them?
A lot of the challenges that I think we're seeing are not unique to AI. I think this is just whether it's any sort of tech adoption, whether it was cloud back in the day, on-prem hybrid sort of solutions that they were looking at. Um, it's always the same sort of things. You need to have a clear purpose. you know, Pick one or two use cases that genuinely have impact and work with those. You can't solve everything. So pick one or two use cases, have a clear purpose. Fix the data first. You've got to make sure that your data is correct before you can build any sort of fancy thing. So, is your data accurate? Is your data right for the region that you are looking to sort of be working in? you need to also invest in people. As much as we talk about, AI and all these things, none of this is possible if you don't have staff who are upskilled. You don't
Mm,
have teams that are cross-functional. So, you need to invest in your people.
mm,
And then, when it comes to sort of scaling up to these things, you've got to build the right tech base. You've got to make sure that, your networks, your security especially, and your ability, when it comes to computing power, is
mm,
able to scale. Because it's wonderful to say,
mm,
we've got 100,000 customers today. 2 months later, if you have 5 million and you're not able to service them, what's the point of, all these things that you're trying to do? And then
mm,
obviously you've got to put guardrails in place. You've got to make sure there's ethical use, there's data privacy, and there's transparency. If people want to know what's happening with my data, you need to be able to tell them. It's not a thing you can add on later. And we've said this week in, week out. Security needs to be from implementation. And those things are not exclusive to AI. That's just what you should be doing, as you're building a business.
mm. Most definitely. And I know you mentioned that obviously at the end of the day, we have to, adapt, and all organizations and companies will have to eventually adapt because we are moving into, or we are already actually in the AI space. Now, what role do you see AI playing in various industries, and which sectors do you think will benefit most by this?
I think we spoke about it when we're talking about e-commerce. I
Mm,
think retail is definitely going to, be impacted by this.
mm,
Smarter supply chains, more personalized marketing. We definitely, spoken about that before.
mm,
Financial services, where AI can improve risk modeling, but also customer service.
mm,
Manufacturing and logistics, to automation and sort of predictive maintenance. Certain machines will wear down after being used X amount of time. So if you can predict that and you can maintain that, it helps you as a business.
mm,
And then obviously healthcare. I think we've seen a lot of stuff in healthcare where, AI has been used to speed up diagnosis, discovery of new medications, helping diagnose things that you might have to go to a doctor, a specialist, another specialist, go back for another opinion. Those sort of things I think are the ones who are going to be the most impacted. But I think essentially any industry that handles a lot of data or any sort of repetitive processes, manufacturing or something like that, those are going to be the ones that could benefit if it's implemented thoughtfully and correctly.
mm. Most definitely. And as much as, the companies like Cisco and maybe many others who are now pressurizing, companies, or, putting pressure on them to adapt to AI and implement it, do you think enough is also being done, or are there organizations also that are also putting pressure on the security side or the safety side of AI?
Which I think is probably the best question out of all of this, because at the end of the day, that's the thing that we all should be concerned about. I think we need more regulation. I think we need governments who understand what the impact of AI is and not just pushing it forward for the sake of, a tech arms race, to
Mm,
try to beat some other country or region, because that's certainly not the way to do it. You've got companies like Mozilla, which is the company behind Firefox. They've got a nonprofit organization which is not focused just on AI, but has been focused for such a long time on data privacy, on security, which I think a lot of people don't know. And they're also quite a big tech company.
mm,
So they've done everything from being able to say, oh, this phone you bought, to this, smart speaker you bought, how secure is it? How safe is it? What happens with your data with that company? So they, are one of the companies who've always been focused on privacy and sort of helping regulate that. But I think when you look at an African perspective, I think we're still very lost. I think we still need a lot more regulation. I think we still need a lot more education in terms of how to mitigate this, because it's all good and well to say, the companies have to regulate themselves. Absolutely, there's that element. But how do you know that regulation is effective if you don't understand, what's going on and what needs to be done? And something as simple as fining them is not going to do much, because these companies are making billions. So I think we definitely need to do more in terms of making sure that the AI is ethical, making sure that it's responsible, making sure that safeguards are actually in place and that they are being implemented the way they should be.
mm. Most definitely. And just in closing, Brendan, what advice would you give to companies that are just starting out their AI journey?
Oh, this is a difficult one because it moves so fast.
Mm,
Um, in the tech space, there's always been this sort of feeling of start small, you learn fast, and it used to be break things. That's what the famous sort of Facebook thing, is Facebook and Apple where, you move fast and you break things. I think now it's you need to learn to stay grounded.
mm,
You need to have clear business problem. You need to have a problem you're trying to solve and the data you already have. And it doesn't need to be the flashiest tools. It doesn't need to be the latest and greatest. It needs to be focusing on the right thing that creates a value for what you're trying to do,
Mm,
and for the people that you are trying to help. And
mm,
you need to build a team that is cross-disciplinary so that you don't have a business team with an objective and then a tech team sitting somewhere else and no one's speaking to each other. So I think those are some of the key things. And then governance, which is exactly what we're just speaking about now, that responsible ethical AI. You need to have that in place from the beginning. I think those are probably some of the most important. And obviously, as we said before, investing in people. That is
mm.
probably the biggest thing of all.
Most definitely. But Brendon, thank you so much for your time and for, just letting us know or sharing your insights on the Cisco AI Readiness Index 2025. We appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
You are welcome. Viewers at home, that was our in-house tech expert, Brendon Petersen, and we were just talking about, emerging technologies like AI and also how Cisco AI Readiness Index 2025 will be identifying top-performing companies or what we call pacesetters that excel in AI adoption. But on that note, it's time for us to head over to a quick break. We'll see you after this.